Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode.
Good competitive start to the game. Fantastic noise inside Ellen Road. There always is on the big nights here. Visitors, however glorious they are, know they're in a game when they come to Leeds. And 𝐿𝐿 struggling, and the free kick has gone directly in, and it's Lee Bowyer, a dream start for Leeds.
And then O'Leary had, established this vibrant young team. So I think we all felt that we stood a decent chance of doing well in the league in 2000, 2001, but I don't think any of us thought that we'd kick on in Europe.
Kick on, you did. How important was the vibrancy then, or the youthful element? My recollections is that O'Leary maybe over-egged that quite a lot. He used to talk about my babies in interviews, and it just felt a wee bit over the top, but clearly this was such a young and hungry team. Players at that end of their career where they just wanted more and more and more, and it's such a huge ingredient, isn't it? As long as you have some kind of experience, talk about David Batty in there, to shape and mould and guide us.
Yeah, I mean the youth really was the thing that sparked the crowd's affection. I mean, one of the curious anomalies about Leeds is that we've never been more successful in terms of having large crowds. We were consistently under O'Leary, we were sold out every week, and I think having that core of players you could identify with, who were clearly friends, for better or for worse, as I'm sure we'll touch on in terms of the assault allegation and the affray charges that really derailed the team in January 2000 and would haunt them for 2 years. Obviously nothing as bad as what happened to 𝐸𝐻𝐸, but it was a hangover that hit them. But they were socialising together, they were hanging out together. There were upsides of that too, as I'm sure we'll touch on, the famous incident after we drew with Milan in San Siro, and Gary Kelly led the players out into the centre circle. Now he talks about that being something that, he was singing Marching On together in a centre circle as the fans, we were all penned into the away section and left, for a good hour afterwards. But he talks about that's what they would do between themselves anyway, during that European campaign. The night before matches, they would hang together. They would never be in their rooms. They would all be in the foyer in the hotel. They'd be ordering pizzas. They'd be talking together. So it really was a sense of unity amongst them.
Yeah, fans can really buy into that, can't they? They what you see as a supporter. When you're watching a team, and when you're just watching a collection of hired hands that are there to kind of do a job, and there's something maybe intangible, but it's something you can really, really buy into. You're a qualifier to deal with before getting into the Champions League proper, 1860 Munich. I won't remind you of the last time that you had a Champions League qualifier, of course, in 92-93. That obviously didn't go too well for you, very well for us. But any nerves around that, or was that just seen as a fairly routine barrier? German side or not?
Yeah, I think O'Leary himself played down our chances, which is one. We talked about earlier about his attitude and the babies and everything. I think he comes across still as a fairly divisive character amongst Leeds fans, and what he does is he tends to lay it on thick. I have spoken to him fairly recently, and you will ask him a question and he will say something along the lines of, "I'm sure I wouldn't have to tell such a great journalist as you," but the answer, and that there's that unctuous thing there, but I think it's in everything that he does. And yet, I've seen him being extremely genuine among fans on pre-season tours. He would send drinks over. When other club officials, when he was assistant manager to Graham, wanted to turf us out of the team hotel, if you were hanging around or anything, he'd be absolutely fine with it. And he would talk to you, and he would be extremely down to earth. And I know ultimately he rubbed the players up the wrong way. And that stuff about my babies, or when he would sort of talk about Alec Ferguson and whether he could potentially be a successor to him, he would always downplay it and portray himself as this terribly naive and young coach who was just right on the bottom rung of the ladder. But I think he had an inner sense of this team being decent. But what we did have for the 1860 Munich game was a lack of personnel. We had injuries that would keep Batty out until December, 𝐾𝐨 out until December. We had problems at centre half, and although they'd invested in the summer, they'd brought in I think Viduka and 𝐵𝐾𝐿 and Matteo. Matteo was injured, so we didn't really know what to expect from the home game. But I mean, although we ended up having 2 players sent off in that home leg, both of them for second bookable offences, which compounded our troubles heading to Munich. It actually, the away leg, which we won 1-0, was actually pretty comfortable, even though you had Kelly playing in midfield, he had Ian Hart playing in midfield. It was not an ideal scenario. But somehow we prevailed.
But surely that experience of the season before, you take a lot from a run to the semi-finals of any European competition. It's dealing with challenges and variance and they're young, but they've got some experience in the bank already. You make it, and like any football fan, especially the first time you're in the Champions League or first time for a while you're back in the Champions League, there is an excitement, there's a frisson, isn't there? And that's some group, really, isn't it? With Barcelona and Milan, 2 huge names, and then you've got probably what you feared the most, which was another trip to Turkey and Besiktas. Your memories of that particular draw, and then weird how often in this particular iteration of the Champions League, teams that get utterly hammered in that first group game go on to have quite successful either runs or just successful group finishes, actually. But yeah, your memories of that group stage, and then the draw, and then the Nou Camp and that opening game.
Yeah, I mean, there was a sense that the last thing we wanted was Besiktas, even more frightening than the prospect of just playing football at San Siro or at the Nou Camp, was the idea of having to go back to Istanbul. And I didn't go away. I'm not sure if there were any away fans allowed there. There was certainly no Besiktas fans at Elland Road for the home game. I think we all felt that Barcelona, I don't think we knew quite what to expect, given that I think Van Gaal had left the previous season, though it still seemed to be largely his team, with Rivaldo given a bit more freedom than Van Gaal would let him. But you just looked at that roster of players and saw how wonderfully they played for Ajax or PSV, and now for Barcelona, and just thought, yeah, it's likely that this is really going to be a step up. And there was a sense going into it, very much like when Man United got hammered by the Romario and 𝐵𝐸𝐽 team, that was on the cards.
This is your typical roller coaster of a campaign. There's luck involved, the Dida mishandling of the Lee Bowyer shot, even Lee Bowyer's shot against, or shot come cross, whatever it was, against Barcelona in that match. There's genuine quality. We're going to talk about the second phase in a moment, and it's just that kind of nice recipe of ingredients, I suppose. Bit of youth, bit of experience, and good matches, and yeah, just things kind of just taking off. But a definite feeling that this is it, really, for them. It's now or never.
Yeah, I mean, Leeds United in this era, they had a soap opera quality, didn't they? Headlines both sides of the newspaper, and there was a vibrancy about the side, as you mentioned. A lot of youngsters in the team. David O'Leary couldn't seem to go an interview without calling them "my babies" every sodding week on Match of the Day. But they were exciting. They played some good stuff. And Leeds, it's maybe difficult for younger listeners, Martin, when Leeds have spent so much of this century, really, either in the lower leagues or a yo-yo club to the top division because of this. But at this point, they were league champions 92-93. They'd been in the Premier League. They'd gone through, we've seen the McAllister-Strachan iteration, then the City Yeboah one, and now they're onto this thing. And they were seized with this ambition, and they were very, this is the time off the field of, in the late 90s, there's the bull stock market, there's internet stocks, there's the Millennium Dome, New Labour, Cool Britannia. And Leeds are, I think, the perfect example of a bubble that grows and grows and grows, and it's really exciting and huge, and you wonder where it's going to stop. And then when it does stop, Jesus, it's destructive, and it takes out a lot of stuff with it. And that is, of course, the Leeds United story of this particular era. But as a football side, putting aside some of the personalities of the people involved, there was a sort of vibrancy about them that also could manifest itself in, you couldn't see this Leeds team winning a title, or certainly I couldn't back then, because you just felt at some point there would be, in the way that some sides are clinical and cold, or like the Manchester United of this era, a side who can, if you like, harness emotion. I felt that Leeds were always, things happened to Leeds rather than because of them at times. They almost seemed like, a protagonist, kind of like the Truman Show, with Leeds, that there was these things that were happening about and around them that they had no control over, but it made for some really exciting football. There's no getting away from it.
I'll pick you up on one thing just to illustrate a point there, David, because you a very rare error. David Leary wouldn't have been on Match of the Day because Match of the Day wasn't happening at that point because of the Premiership and because of ITV and on digital and the huge investment in the lower leagues and what could
I forget the tactics truck
wrong about that. And that's
how could I forget Andy in his truck, one of the seminal his tactics truck, Barry Venison.
But that's what Leeds
but it was he.
They gambled so much on the success and the money that on digital was going to provide. The Champions League exclusively on this digital service. Des Lynam and Ali McCoist in a studio box at Highbury, for example, taking in one of the Arsenal games. I remember, and that's exactly why Leeds found themselves in a bit of bother. Adam, the team itself, again, a lot of young players. Rob was very good at just kind of reminding me how often they had injuries and they had to compensate for those injuries, and players come in and kind of do a shift. It was never this kind of settled thing. I guess a couple of things that come through. Lee Bowyer's a very difficult character to like. And the thing hanging over this whole campaign really is the court case and the potential action on him and Woodgate. And then the course obviously dissolving into farce because the newspaper went early and it was a mistrial. But Lee Bowyer was superb in this season. He was an absolute driving force. And this might be sacrilege on the site, but Mark Viduka was superb. And I guess brilliant foil as a powerful number 9 for a quick, intelligent, fearless striker like Alan Smith to play off. Smith is brilliant. He scores a winner in Rome. You forget just how good he was, and just combinations around the place. Harry Kewell as well, good backs. I mean, what did you make of that team as a shape?
Yeah, loads of fun. I think it's. I think David said, breath of fresh air. I think is fair. It just felt new. It felt like a team just appearing from nowhere. Certainly on the European stage. Again, in the last episode we spoke about tracking Sebastiano Rossi over 8 years. It's tough to believe it's the same club that we spoke about in the very first show when you've got Cantona and all those guys, Gary McAllister, Gordon Strachan, etc. Just 7 or 8 years ago from now. It felt like, as with everything at this time, everything changed in such a short period of time in football, and I think this probably sums it up. They just appear again and they're brand new and fresh and exciting. I don't know if it's because they came out of pretty ropey 5 or 6 years. They had a George Graham 2 years. I think anybody coming out of that would probably be smiling. But the fact that David Leary got them playing such attacking football so quickly, loads of fun, high tempo, high energy, loads of flair. Hasselbank obviously isn't there this year, but it was the year before. Lots of fun, just my type of striker. Nice mix, as you mentioned there, foreign players in terms of European, and then you've obviously got a mix of domestic and Irish players who do quite well. Fullbacks, I like Dean Hart. I thought he was good. I enjoy a fullback that can hit a free kick. Really good. 𝐾𝐨 was exciting. Unfortunately, as we speak through it, there's more than a few Celtic links. And here Robbie Keane comes back from that Inter Milan loan. Again, another bizarre thing that you wouldn't have thought of happening at that stage, but he comes back in as well. So yeah, I think they're a really interesting.
If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.